Do you find yourself captivated by the inexplicable, entranced by enigmas, and tantalized by the unknown? We are Shane and Josh Waters, brothers who will weave you through tales that have mystified us for years. From haunted hotels to inexplicable disappearances, we dig deep, searching for the truth.
Our episodes offer you a panoramic view of the world's greatest mysteries, leaving no stone unturned, no clue unnoticed.
With a gripping narrative, we invite you to join us on a journey into realms of the unexplained.
We're not just recounting tales, we're unraveling the mysteries that have perplexed humanity for ages, blending fact and storytelling into a mesmerizing tapestry.
So, armchair detectives, curious minds, and seekers of the strange, it's time to put on your headphones and dim the lights.
Dive into the uncanny world of the Mystery Inc. podcast and prepare for a journey into the unknown that you'll never forget.
Subscribe now wherever you listen to podcasts.
And remember, some mysteries are better left unsolved, but not unexplored.
Hello, listeners and foil fanatics. It's Brandon from Tinfoil Tales. I want to take a moment of your time before the episode starts to let you know about the new live stream show I have coming out called Tinfoil Tales After Dark. Tinfoil Tales After Dark will be live streamed exclusively on YouTube on the last Thursday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It will be similar to the normal episodes, as there will be a guest on there to share their experiences, but that's not all. You can also be a part of the conversation in the live chat. You can ask questions, talk with other listeners, and even hop on the screen and share your experiences with all of us live. It's going to be a fun and engaging monthly episode that I hope everyone enjoys. Make sure to head over to the Tinfoil Tales YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Mark your calendars for Thursday, February 29th, and every last Thursday of each month to take part in Tinfoil Tales After Dark discussions. Now let's get back to the normal episode.
And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight we're going to be joined by my guest, Phill. You may know Phill from Exploring with Phill. He does videos on YouTube, goes out and does some investigations for paranormal stuff around the Bridgewater Triangle and some other areas. But now he's going to come on here and talk to us about the Pukwudgies, something that I've been wanting to dive into, and I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. But before we bring Phill on, if you ever had an encounter you want to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. We'll get you scheduled for a future episode. If you want to help the podcast, continue to share it around. You can leave a 5-star review or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're available on all social media, so make sure to check us out on there. Give us a follow. If you're interested in helping the podcast, there's always the Patreon. That is included in the show notes. You get access to ad-free content and early access to new episodes, so it's worth checking out if you're interested in helping that way. But I think now we're going to go ahead and bring Phill on. I want to just dive right into it, so hope you guys are enjoying what we've been doing here lately, and hope you enjoy tonight's episode. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight, Phill. Phill, thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you for having me. It should be a great conversation about Pukwudgies.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it. Do you want to let the audience know a little bit about yourself before we get into it?
Sure, absolutely. So currently I do weekly YouTube videos every single Thursday. I do primarily ghost hunting, exploration, urban exploration, but primarily paranormal investigations in the Bridgewater Triangle, various locations within the Bridgewater Triangle. For those who don't know what the Bridgewater Triangle is, it's just a triangulation area in southeastern Massachusetts that has a high concentration of paranormal activity and claims. So I've been basically investigating that area for about 2 years now, and I'm here to talk about Pukwudgies because Pukwudgies are a part of that lore in the Bridgewater Triangle, and not only that, in Indiana as well. So a little bit of connecting tissues here. So that's basically what I do. My YouTube channel is Exploring with Phill. You can find me on all social medias, Exploring with Phill. That's Phill with two L's.
Now, I've heard some of your stuff. I've watched some of your episodes and some of the videos you post and everything. I've always wanted to do what you do, but at the same time, I'm kind of limited on being able to do that. And then sometimes I'm kind of a wuss when it comes. I don't want to have something following me back.
Did that? Well, that's not like the worst thing in the world to,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like, because you definitely have to protect yourself for sure. And the more you do that kind of stuff, you definitely are going to experience more things, whether you want to or not. So if you're not comfortable with like experiencing more things, then because I guess that's what the biggest thing is, like the lack of control sometimes, because you can't really control like what's happening around you, I suppose. I mean, obviously you protect yourself with prayers and God and all that stuff, but you never know what voice you're gonna catch or sound that you're gonna catch or hear in the moment that'll freak you out. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think it's one of those things that you get better at as you go along and you get less afraid as you go along. But yeah, it's definitely interesting, man.
Back in the early 2000s, we used to go a lot, and I did a lot of dumb things when you're right out of high school. And I just feel like nowadays that I've gotten older and I feel like a bit wiser and children and everything. And I was like, man, I don't really want to go out there and look for this stuff anymore because I might, you never know what I'm going to bring back. So,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And like, yeah, and right, you're right. If you start it depending the place you go, like sometimes you go to a place and it's not known for some sort of dark presence or something, and then you never know. Never know what you're walking into for sure, you know?
yeah, I don't want to get into it, but I've had some weird stuff happen around here in our own home. So it's like, I feel like anymore, it's just like one of those things where I was like, I don't want to push that envelope too much.
Yeah, yeah, I do not blame you whatsoever. Like your home is your sanctuary. And it's just like that's one place where like you shouldn't or don't want to have issues. You know what I mean? For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. What made you decide that you wanted to start looking into this stuff?
Well, I had various paranormal experiences throughout my life, which definitely led me to have more interest in the paranormal. Obviously growing up, it was very a fringe. It's still very much a fringe thing back in the day. I've talked about this before on other podcasts, but I just find it so interesting. Like back when I was a kid, like the only thing you'd see about ghosts that was legitimate would be like like a random unsolved mysteries episode or something. There wasn't really a lot of real ghost investigations, paranormal like stuff that was out there into the public eye that you would see on TV that was like legitimate or even at all. So growing up there, and then once the 2000s kind of hit and Ghost Hunters happened, that's really when like it started to become more on the forefront and more at least legitimate in my eyes at the time. Um, and being like, oh wow, this is like something that you can actually investigate and not just like sit around and talk about ghost stories. Like you can actually, there's people actually out there investigating these things, documenting it, trying to figure out what's really happening, all that kind of stuff. So I would say that's probably my interest obviously in the paranormal stems from that and wanting to find out what's really going on. Um, Obviously my own personal experiences play into that, being like what really happened, when I had my experiences and stuff and being like kind of propelled me into like wondering and thinking about that kind of stuff and wondering really what's going on.
I feel like that's kind of what happens with most people is they've had something strange that happened and you start to seek the answers for the questions you've gotten from the weirdness that happened.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely seems to be a common thread for sure with like paranormal, whether that's like cryptid people or UFO people, paranormal ghost people. Usually there's some sort of event or so you're right, some sort of event that like triggers that. It's interesting how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But what about you? Do you have some sort of something that triggered you into getting into like talking about this kind of stuff on a podcast level?
Yeah. We can, I don't want to dive into it on the episode. I've talked about it enough, but
Ah, okay, gotcha, gotcha.
I can let you know here off air. But basically, the Cliff's Notes version is back in 2007, I encountered something very strange in the middle of the road with a coworker. He was in front of me driving, and he swerved to miss it, and I had to swerve to miss it too. We turned around, went back, and it just got crazier after we got back to go see what it actually was. So it's a very cryptid instance, but no, that's what really got me to do the whole podcast because for 15 years I never talked about it because when I tried to talk about it, obviously people think you're crazy.
Oh, of course, of course.
So, my coworker didn't want to talk about it. Like right after it happened, he said he was going to deny it and he didn't want to talk about it. And so I just kept it to myself. And then I was like, you know what? I want to start a podcast. And originally, obviously, with the name, I had a buddy. We talked about like conspiracies and all sorts of different things like UFOs. And I was like, man, I want to start a podcast where because people used to call me like tinfoil hat or whatever because of some of the wacky things I thought about or talked about. I was like, I'll make a podcast. We can talk about that. Well, I didn't really go through. And then I was like, you know what? I just want to start talking to people kind of like myself that had like weird experiences and then started doing research. And I came across like Wes Germer's Sasquatch Chronicles, like the first one I found that actually was like interviewed people. I was like, oh, well, that's cool. And then led me to Tony Merkel's The Confessionals. And then I was like, oh, I thought I had an original idea, but apparently there's a lot of people out there doing what I was thinking about doing, but that's
Yeah.
that's kind of where I go though from there. Like it's just
No,
like,
that's awesome. No, that's awesome. And that's cool. And like I said, that's usually how it is. There's some sort of like moment or something for everyone where like you kind of start getting into whatever it is. So yeah, that's awesome, man. I love that. I'll have to you have to send me that link of where you talk about that in more in depth. I'll have to give that a listen for sure.
yeah, not a problem. But no, basically, like we just said, everyone's for the most part, I think, has something that triggers that whole curiosity. Now, I grew up watching the X-Files and I love monster movies and stuff like that. So I was always like interested in the stuff. I just never thought it was real. And even today, I try and remain skeptical on a lot of things, but at the same time, it's like, who am I to the things that happened to me? If someone told me my encounter, I'd be like, yeah, I'd be skeptical about my own encounter. So it's kind of
Yeah,
like,
right, right, right.
but
Exactly.
no, that's why I do what I do. So, but yeah, I definitely appreciate you coming on here talking with me about it. And if you'd like to dive into the Pukwudgie stuff, we can do that if you want to.
So, Pukwudgies, at least in New England lore, are the Wampanoag tribe, which is the tribe in my area. Uh, the Pukwudgie is known as like a trickster humanoid type of creature, but completely covered in hair. Now, in their lore and legend, the Pukwudgies got along with humans at first, but then the love of humans and giants became greater than human and Pukwudgies, and they became jealous of the humans' love for the giants. And so they took the giant at the time, and this is obviously in Wampanoag legend. His name was Moshup. They took his 5 sons and they killed his 5 sons. These are the Pukwudgies now. And so when Moshup finds this out, obviously he's very upset. And so he banishes the Pukwudgies to all different corners of the United States or North America, which is very interesting. And so from that moment on, at least in Wampanoag culture, Pukwudgies and humans don't necessarily get along. Like they can get along, but there is definitely friction there. So they're known as tricksters generally. They are completely covered in hair, anywhere from 2 to 4 foot tall, depending on what reports you see or read. But generally anywhere from 2 to 4 foot tall, completely covered in hair. Like to play tricks on people. They like to either lead someone to their death or lead someone to their doom. They can reappear and disappear at will. So which begs the question, maybe there's some sort of half physical, half spiritual creature or something. But that's basically essentially the Pukwudgie lore in Massachusetts as far as like historically and legend speaking. And then I do have one other story about Pukwudgies and humans as far as them interacting. Now, there was this one story, and this is one of the only more, I guess, probably the only positive story you could find about Pukwudgies, at least in New England, is there's this one instance where a Pukwudgie's wife is not doing well, is either sick. It's very unclear what the problem is, whether it's a sickness or a wound or something. Whatever the case may be, the Pukwudgie can't heal uh his mate. And so he goes and gets the help of this, Wampanoag woman. And so the Pukwudgie blindfolds her, brings her, to his home, which looks to be like a completely different world, the way the woman describes it. And so she basically takes care of this woman, Pukwudgie, heals him up. The Pukwudgie thanks the human for doing this. Um, she covers up the eyes, like leads him back to where they got him from. And basically that's sort of the end of it right there, right then and there. But that's like sort of the only like more positive story where a human helped them out and they were grateful for them helping them out. Now there's also like where as far as Pukwudgies, there's also some bleed through with some other small entities with different names, it's where it gets kind of murky. Because there's this other little people called Mika Wisugs, according to the Wampanoags anyway, which is completely different than well, appears to be completely different than the Pukwudgie. And it's more of like a humanoid, not covered in hair, but a little bit shorter, but like a little person sort of thing. So there seems to be two different types of like little people, Pukwudgies, and little people. I don't know if these are two of the same things or the legends are getting confused over time and they're kind of merging together into one legend. I'm still doing research to try to figure that out, but that's basically the Pukwudgie lore in Massachusetts. So now I've done some research into these new little people where through paranormal investigation out in the Huckamuck Swamp, which is part of the Bridgewater Triangle, which is a location where these Pukwudgies allegedly live, dwell, that sort of thing, or at least known to live there. Now, I've gotten a lot of things over the past few, I would say, year and a half, where at first I just didn't really think much of it, because I started getting into like trying to figure out, as far as like creation of Pukwudgies and, trying to figure out like where's the origin at least, is this could this possibly be a man-made thing? Is this some sort of elemental kind of thing? Because there's kind of some bleed over with the elemental stuff from Scotland as far as the little people and that go. It like some of the, if you look up that kind of stuff, or if you ever done any research on that, like they sound kind of similar as well. So it's like there's so many angles to this where like there's so many similarities between so many different things that it's like, man, is like I said, there's so many unanswered questions. But so I've been doing a lot of research into their origins of these Pukwudgies, and throughout that process, now I've kind of discovered these other little people that I think are completely different than Pukwudgies, and I think either beside them or well in the same areas. Now that I'm not 100% sure, but it's definitely crazy. Now, are you familiar with like the Indiana legends as far as the Pukwudgies go compared to like Massachusetts? Is it very similar or like are Pukwudgies over there all bad? Because over here they're pretty much all bad.
I haven't actually talked to anyone that's done the research
Sure.
around
Okay.
here, so it's all more or
Gotcha.
less just I've just heard stories like people say that they seen them in the state park down here, Mountain State Park, and then where we're saying off air, like when I was a kid, the old battlegrounds or whatever they always called it Hobbit Land because they saw little people running around through there. But I've never found any actual research. I've actually tried to Google stuff, and there's not a whole lot out there for anyone that's really talked about what they've encountered with them, other than they've seen little people or something.
Yeah, and I think that's also really strange because I found that to be the case too. Like trying to like do research for Pukwudgies in general, there really isn't a lot that comes up. So I had to do some research and buy like a Native American Wampanoag book, and that's how I was able to figure out that there was these other little people and they had a different name. You know, because if you try to Google that, like it doesn't even come up. Like
Hmm.
you know, like so there's a lot of I think like research and names of things as far as the Native American names and stuff that have all are sort of almost lost to history or almost being lost to history just because you know they were just like legends and stuff that just didn't carry over. You know, the Pukwudgie carried over into pop culture like barely, but these other entities seem to be not. So, dude, it's definitely interesting. I think my gut feeling is that Pukwudgies are indifferent at best. Just that's just based on my investigations and like how because I feel like I've come across them in a few instances. At least they say they're Pukwudgies. Now, obviously, I'm taking EVPs and spirit box responses at you know face value. Obviously, it could be anything saying it's anything when you're doing this when you are asking any type of questions like that. So you always have to take everything with a grain of salt. But with that said, you know, that I've had gotten responses that, you know, said Pukwudgies, little people, all that kind of stuff, correlating with um, kind of their legend and stuff. Now, what's really interesting about the little people is I did not know anything about them at all. And so while doing research for the creation of Pukwudgies, asking questions out in the Huckamuck, being like, who created you? Did humans create you? Did angels create you? All these questions kind of like that. Did God create you? I kept on getting responses like, we're hungry, we want food, um, help us, hear me, like that kind of stuff. And I always thought it was just strange, you know, because like in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if it's a ghost, right? Why would a ghost want food? That doesn't make any sense. So then I'm like, well, maybe they don't know they're dead. That could be a possibility. But then I'm like, oh, well, maybe. But then I kept on getting it over and over. So I'm like, that's really strange. So then I was doing research for Pukwudgies. I came across the little people I was talking about before. And then and part of their legend and lore, the Native Americans used to leave them food in the woods as offerings, just kind of like the elementals sort of deal. Which I didn't even know at the time. So here I am getting all this evidence being like, hey, feed me. We want food. But basically just saying the same things that this book is saying that they say they want. And it's just like, man, and it's just like the connective tissue there. And I was like, wow. And I didn't even know that I had no idea that about any of that until after I got the book. And then I started thinking about it. And I'm like, oh my God, I've gotten all this stuff that's correlating with these creatures that are described in this book that I didn't even know about. So that's been really, really interesting, a part of this whole process. Like, I feel like when you research anything, it's just like you think you're gonna research Pukwudgies, and then all of a sudden it just opens up into all these other things, and you're like, whoa. Like I was just trying to just research about Pukwudgies, and now it's opened up into this whole other little people thing where it's like, you know, it's a whole other world, you know? Um, but yeah, it's definitely been interesting for sure. Um, so do you want me to get into some of my research as far as like as far as what I think Pukwudgies might possibly be?
Yeah, you can do that, but I had a couple questions first.
Absolutely, fire away.
Now, you mentioned like the little people over, like the Irish, obviously, they had the leprechauns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've always heard connections with the Pukwudgies being somewhat like fairies, almost like the Fae.
Yeah.
Have you come across anything that you can compare to that?
Yes, yes. I have gotten correlating responses saying things like that. I have gotten fairy before there. Now, with where this is where it gets kind of weird because I've gotten also like little people, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So that makes me think that like these little people that the Native Americans were describing, not the Pukwudgies necessarily, but just like the little people are probably close in relation to the elemental fairy folk, that sort of line of thing. And what's interesting about that, of like the Native American side of that, is it seems like the English people that came to America, as far as the Pilgrims and all those early settlers, did not bring um that culture and that those elemental stuff with them because they were very much anti that. And so it's very strange to have these elemental creatures in America completely separate from the other ones in Scotland, but basically the same thing. Especially when you start reading about them, they literally sound like exactly like fairy folk.
I think it's either Norway or Sweden, one of the two. But they also have you seen where they have like little houses and the little hillsides that they have out there for I think they call them the
Yes.
elves.
Yeah, like the little nieces. They
Uh-huh.
also call them nieces or something as well. Yeah,
Hmm.
very similar. That's what I'm saying with these like connective tissues between the like different cultures and stuff. Even between Native American tribes, it's definitely there's definitely something to it. And there's those connective tissues I think are really interesting for sure.
That's kind of where I was going with it is there's different countries, different tribes, like you just mentioned, and they're very similar elements to the stories and everything too. So it's almost like it's folklore, but something had to influence that. It's strange that different cultures have all the same type of elements to them for something that's just supposed to be a folklore story.
Yeah, right. And it's supposed to be like completely independent of one another too.
Hmm.
So like that's like what I find super fascinating about all of this stuff, especially like the Pukwudgie stuff. And I've had Pukwudgies encounters in Tennessee, and technically there is no Pukwudgies in Tennessee. Like it's just very, very strange. It's like I said, it's definitely there definitely seems to be connected pieces between different cultures, different tribes of literally either maybe not the same names, but they're describing almost the same identical things, just by different names and different, and maybe even like little similarities between the two of them. But primarily they're basically the same things.
Now down in Tennessee, it's obviously around Kentucky, and it's not too far from here. Um, I've talked to someone before, and they'd mentioned that they saw something look like a goblin. Well, he said a golem from like Lord of the Rings, and I took it as like a Kentucky goblin. It's
Hmm.
like a small humanoid looking thing, but Pukwudgies you said are covered in hair, and this thing didn't have any hair.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
I'm not sure. Like they didn't know what a Kentucky goblin was. I was like, well, that sounds like something that I've heard before, but called a Kentucky goblin. But they didn't say it had ears or anything like that. They just said it was like a small human looking thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, like I said, that's interesting for sure. Those kind of reports are just like so cool to to hear about and stuff like that because I've never seen I would love to see a Pukwudgie with my own eyes. Like I've caught EVPs and spirit box responses that are saying they're Pukwudgies and saying things and stuff like that. But to like actually see something like that in person, oh man, that's gotta be wild. Especially when you're not expecting it, like
yeah.
like I'm researching and going out there expecting and hoping and expecting to catch something on camera. But if I actually did, if one just like popped up in front of me, was like, "Hey, what's going on?" Like,
Hmm.
like, oh man, like, yikes.
Well, this guy he was out looking for Bigfoot stuff, and they weren't even looking for Bigfoot. They were just on a walk, and they come across this thing, and he was talking to me about his Bigfoot experiences, and he randomly mentioned that, and I was like, I almost became more interested in hearing about the little creature rather than the Bigfoots, but it is
Yeah,
just.
right, right. Especially something like that. That is, I feel like a more of a rare paranormal experience for sure. Like you hear about Bigfoot encounters a lot.
Hmm.
You hear about, especially like nowadays, you're hearing about dogman encounters a lot more, but you don't really hear about a lot of Pukwudgie encounters. There's the guy up here in Massachusetts that has a super famous encounter, and now I'm like blanking on his name. But he's like in this documentary, the Bridgewater Triangle documentary, and he had an encounter with a Pukwudgie. Um, so like that's probably the most famous one, but like you don't really, there isn't really, it doesn't, it's very strange. It's just, I don't know if it's just because it's localized or they're just in particular areas or they don't want, I mean, like you said, maybe it's like Bigfoot, they don't want to be seen. And if you could disappear and reappear at will, that's probably why you're not being seen, unless you wanted to be, you know?
Hmm. I actually have an interview with someone scheduled sometime in February. I don't know the exact time, but it's about the Bridgewater Triangle too. But they had a Thunderbird encounter, so
Really?
so
Oh, dude, I'm
I'm
gonna have
very
to tune
excited about
into
that.
that one.
I'm
Hell
very excited
yes.
about the Thunderbird.
Absolutely. I would love to hear about that. There's only one report that I know about, and it's like of a police officer in like the 1970s who was in the town of Abington, Massachusetts, and on top of some hill in Abington somewhere. I can't remember the street, but he basically saw a thunderbird type animal fly over his like the tops of the trees, and like the way he described it, it was huge, massive, massive, like a pterodactyl size kind of
Hmm.
animal. So dude, yeah, I'm gonna have to check that. I can't wait for that. I'm gonna have to reach out to this person and be like, where did you see this? Because I'll have to do a video there.
I know I don't remember what year it was. I think it was back in the 70s, but over in Illinois, they had sightings of a very large bird. And I think one actually supposedly tried to pick up a little boy.
Oh
And
my God.
I had someone reach out to me on Reddit, which they didn't want to come on the show. So it is me kind of second handing the story. But basically, up in around the Illinois line from Indiana, like northwest Indiana area, something flew at their vehicle at nighttime. And it obviously could have been a big ass owl, who knows? But they said it had like, I think they said it was like a 15, 20 foot wingspan. Again,
Jeepers Christ.
at nighttime, I don't know. It's hard to tell, but
Mm,
they said it was almost as wide as the lane of the road. Well, usually a lane of a road is about 12 feet. So I could see where they come up with 10 to 15 feet wingspan. But yeah, it swooped down as they were driving at nighttime. But that's the only time they really got a good look at it. So I was like, it's not really. We could do an episode, but it'd be like a 30-second episode, kind of. You know what I mean?
yeah,
There's
yeah,
not a whole lot to talk about.
it's so difficult if it's dark like that.
Hmm.
Like you just can't get a good description of it.
Yeah, but they said they definitely looked like it had feathers.
Yeah,
I was like, well, again, I was
that's
like, there's big birds out there. Obviously, we have eagles around here now, and there's actually a bald eagle's nest just a mile from my house. We see them all the time now. It's kind of cool.
that is pretty cool.
There
That
was
is
one,
awesome.
there was one out yesterday. It was sitting on the in the tree over at my neighbor's house. So I was like, he's probably wanting to go out and eat my chickens in the backyard.
Yeah. Definitely. He's definitely eyeing him up.
You know, I ended up building them a cage with a net on top and everything else. I was like, well, they're at least protected in there. But no, he
Yeah.
was sitting over there staring our direction. I was like, I bet he's wanting to go eat some chickens for breakfast.
100%. No, they're pretty impressive animals. I've seen one up in Maine, up in the wild. They're pretty incredible.
You know, for
Yeah.
it's cool that they're literally they nest. They've been up there. I've seen them for 3 years now. The nest is always in the same spot, and we always see them. If the one's not there, there's always at least one around the nest somewhere. So it's kind of cool that there's a mating pair just literally a mile away.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. No, they're majestic animals, that's for sure.
But no, if you want to go back into what you've come across and what you've kind of think these Pukwudgies are, kind of got off topic for a bit, but
Oh yeah.
I thought
Yeah,
you
no
might enjoy
worries.
the Thunderbird thing.
Oh, dude, no, the hell yeah. As soon as you told me that, I'm like, oh my God, that's incredible. No, like I said, yeah, I can't wait for that because I wanna do a whole thing on that. That's awesome. Yeah, because that's just a report you just don't hear a lot about, like Pukwudgies. Actually, if you want, my uncle had a Pukwudgie encounter. Do you want me to? I can retell that real quick if you want.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's a cool little like first-hand of account of a Pukwudgie because I haven't seen one, but my uncle did. So this is an account from the 1980s. So like early 1980s, and back in this time, this is like before anyone knows what a Pukwudgie is. This is like well before it's even common knowledge so my uncle just thought it was like a demon or something, just some sort of you know, dark entity or something. He didn't know what to make of it. So basically, they lived in this haunted house, this haunted home, and from moment one, they had activity. Night one, furniture would move in the middle of the night. They had a woman show up one day that looked like a witch dressed in Victorian clothes, wanted to come into the house with black eyes, kind of like a black-eyed kids thing. And this is the 80s, well before that's even a thing. So just a lot of weird paranormal things happening in this home and in the neighborhood itself. There was this one another instance where a baby was heard crying outside. They heard it multiple times in the neighborhood from this certain house. The house is empty. There's no one there. They call the cops. Cops to check it out. No one inside. No baby, no nothing. This happened repeatedly, and so it's just a very haunted neighborhood, haunted home. So one particular night, he's driving home towards the house. All of a sudden, this 3 foot tall, 4 foot tall creature appears in the middle of the road in front of him, completely covered in hair. He's going to hit this thing. He slams on his brakes. He's about to make contact, disappears, and he basically like drives through this thing. Keeps on going, like looks in the turns around, looks behind him to be like, well, I thought I was going to hit something. There's nothing there. Fast forward to the last night that they're going to move out of this home. They've only were there 1 year because of the paranormal activity in this home. Um, so they're about to move out. They've moved out almost everything. He goes to the top of the stairs. It's a two-floor home. So he's up on the second floor. And on the second floor, there's an attic. And it's one of those attics where it's just a push attic where you just push up the panel and you have to get like an actual ladder to climb up in there. And so out from the hole pops down this entity, which is basically what he describes as a Pukwudgie. I think he described it as 2.5 foot tall, completely covered in hair, kind of like a humanoid style face. So basically, when it jumped down, it had his back turned to him. And so when it turned around, it saw my uncle, their eyes connected, and the Pukwudgie looked like shocked that he was there. And he literally disappeared right in front of his eyes. And then he was just gone, as if, there was nothing there. So that's like my uncle's Pukwudgie encounter. So I tell that just to get like a general idea of like a real Pukwudgie encounter that someone actually has. Now, one of the lores I forgot to mention with Pukwudgies is there's this bit where they like children. Now, I'm still doing research on it because I only found one sentence in one like historical thing about Pukwudgies or like a legend thing. So I don't want to like go off it and like say that that was definitely 100% part of the legend when I've only found one like thing referencing it.
Yeah.
So but I did want to mention it, but there's also this part where they could be soul stealers, which is interesting angle. So they allegedly I've only found one reference for this, but they allegedly could steal souls and they like collect them for some reason, or they're a collector of souls for what purpose or what reason, I'm not sure. I don't know if they're collecting lost souls or if they're just collecting souls on their own or under the guidance of something or whatever, but that's like another angle that I'm like trying to find more evidence for as far as like lore, historical lore or something outside of just one book. But yeah, that's like another angle of it that's just kind of like the weird, where it starts to get a little bit darker, where it's like, yeah, they can play tricks on you, but if it's gonna steal your soul, that doesn't seem like a nice entity to me,
No.
you
That
know?
that has that evil vibe to it.
Yes,
That
absolutely. Absolutely. Which is, it could be a possibility with Pukwudgies, if depending on, who they're created by, what their purpose is, because if they are a creation, then they have to have a purpose. So like, what is that purpose? If you follow the dark angle, then like, oh, they're a collector of souls and are not supposed to be maybe traveling around or doing stuff, and they collect them and stop them from moving around. I don't know. But yeah, dude, it's when you start getting into that kind of stuff, then you're like, oof, man, you're like they go from like a cute little cuddly, friendly looking creature to, scary real quick.
yeah. I think all these type of cryptids or lores or anything like that, they all have a bit of darkness to them for the most part. I don't know if that was, I don't know if the stories were influenced from people trying to like scare people back in like the old days and they just created things, or something obviously really happened and they use that as influence to tell these stories. So,
Yeah, yeah, but they're I mean, you're right because even in like the Pukwudgie stuff, like there's very little good about them. Like there's one little thing like, oh, they could save you. But everything else, soul stealers, lead you to your doom, play tricks on you. Like it's it doesn't sound like most of it's not good. Like, there's a small chance they might save you. So it's like, oh, do you really want to be, you know,
you really want to
friendly?
test that out?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And dude, I've asked that in the Huckamuck, right? I asked that one time, being like, I don't know what prompted me. I just like popped in my head. I was like, if I was like, if I was drowning, would you save me? And they said, I got the responses, basically being like, yes, of course, we love you, Philip. We would save you, like all that kind of stuff, all in a row, real quick. But they also just could be saying that too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just because they say that, doesn't mean that actually is true.
That's if you're
So
talking to the Pukwudgies too, kind of like what you mentioned
yes.
earlier. You don't really know what you're really communicating with.
Right, right. So you always have to take everything with a grain of salt for sure. Because you do never know. It's not like you could see them standing in front of you and you'd be like, "Oh, I can identify you. You're not a Pukwudgie. Why are you lying to me?" You know what I'm saying? So like, you
Hmm.
can't see them physically. So when it comes to EVPs and all that kind of stuff, you just take it for what it is and then try to make sense of it and try to, hopefully learn new things and discover new things. And hopefully it's for me, it's been working out fairly well. I've been trying to learn more and more. Obviously between it's obviously part investigation, part like reading and doing like that backside. Because if you just investigate without the research, then you're not really going to get anywhere. So you definitely need like both, where like you have to do the research and then you have to test that research out in the field and ask those questions and that kind of stuff. And hopefully, fingers crossed, get somewhere with it or maybe hopefully learn something about Pukwudgies or these other little things or whatever. But it's definitely interesting for sure. I would love to get out to Indiana, man, and get out there and do some research on some of those Pukwudgies out there for sure.
So only know of the one place really, and my in-laws used to camp out there, and I don't think they've ever really had any kind of weird stuff happen. They've never mentioned it to me. They know what I do for a podcast, so
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
figured if they had any type of weird little people encounters, they'd have said something. But that is that Mound State Park is only about an hour from where I live, so I've been down there a few times. Obviously, when they were camping over the summer, we went down there and visited and everything, but I never went through the trails or anything like that because, again, having little kids, it makes it really hard to go do that. I don't have the exploring time anymore like I used to.
Yeah, dude, I'm sure with kids and stuff, that's got to be tough. Like your free time is that much more limited.
Hmm.
And with your pod, like I'm sure most of your free time you got to spend, perfecting your craft and all that stuff. So I totally get that. Now, in Indiana, I want to ask you a question. You might not know. Do you guys have a lot of like swamps in Indiana or no?
Not to my knowledge, not around here at least. I think
Okay.
southern Indiana might have more because obviously once you get towards the southern part around Kentucky area, you've got more of, or not so much mountains, but it's a lot more hilly getting into the mountain type of area for like obviously the Appalachians and stuff.
Right,
But
right.
I think like more towards the southeastern portion, it might be swampy. I know it's more, like I said, hilly and stuff like that. But up here, I live in the middle of cornfields. It's pretty much flat. And
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's whenever I've been out to Indiana, it's always, a lot of cornfields and farmland and stuff like that. That's why I was wondering because only reason why I asked that is because with puckwudgies in New England, they are usually found in swamps. And what I found interesting about um is this other legend about I can't give it credit because I don't remember what podcast it was on. But I was listening to a podcast, they were talking about the swamp in Louisiana, and they're describing all these claims and all these things that happen in the swamp. And every single one of them was matching up with the claims that are in the Hockomock Swamp in Massachusetts, even down to like the little people and the Pukwudgie type stuff. So that's why I asked if there was swamps there, because I'm just wondering if there's like correlations between swamps and these Pukwudgies and other like little entities or other cryptids, you know. I don't know if it's just because swamps are just a place where humans aren't, and so that's where these things are because there's not a lot of humans there, or if there's something about swamps that attract these things there.
There's
Um,
always been lures with swamps, and I don't want to say that they're haunted, but it seems like there's always some sort of like high strangeness energy around swamps. Even like I get in, maybe it's just because fantasy stuff and stuff like that that I'm thinking about, but like it seems like there's always been stories of like I try to think like the bog, like the hag of the old hag stories, like from they're in a swamp. There's been spirits of the swamps, like
mhm.
there's all sorts of things when it comes to like swampy areas. So it kind of does make you wonder if maybe it's because the water source is like a high energy thing for them. I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, or obviously some sort of correlation there. Just because I think it's fascinating, and I'm like, you know, those are the kind of connections I'm like th I think about because I'm like, oh, maybe there's like a connection to the land, and you know, these it's the swamps that's, you know, either yeah, like creating a place for these to be like a great habitat for them, whether it's the energy or like, you know, I don't know what it is, but there definitely seems to be something that's um correlating between those things for sure. That's why I mentioned it because I was like, I wonder. Because but then then if you said that southern Indiana has, you know, possibility of some swamp areas, then I'm like, I wonder, you know, I wonder if that's the areas where there's Pukwudgie activity. Um, Now, and where in relation is the spot where you think there could have been a Pukwudgie sighting or a little person sighting? That's like near where you live, right?
Yeah, the Mountain State Park's in Anderson. It's northeast of Indianapolis, so it's more in the
Okay.
flat area. But I still think there's obviously rivers and stuff that flow through there too. So there's still some that they call it Mountain State Park, and I don't know why. I could have researched it, but I'm pretty sure like there was like like mounds, like Indian like mounds, like burial ground or something like that.
Oh, see, now that makes even more sense for sure.
Like I'm not gonna quote myself and don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that was part of the reason why they named it that because it's an odd name just to call it Mountain State Park if it didn't have anything to do with like hills or mountains or anything.
Right, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that well, you know what? That would make total sense for sure. Because then you add in the Native American angle. And it's like, oh, that's no wonder. So yeah, that's interesting for sure. Because yeah, Pukwudgies and the Native Americans seem to have a close relationship, no matter what part of the country you're talking about. So yeah, so that's super interesting.
The official government website for the park says it's an avid hiker spot with hills and now the page just disappeared. I clicked on it. I clicked on it to load because it only gave me like the brief description and then it completely went off. It gives me the address and everything. But no, like it's not flat through there. It's like a bunch of trees. It's hilly and obviously there's a bunch of hiking trails and stuff. And I've talked to people that have hiked through there and they claim it's a great place to go. So, I mean, like I said, I don't know why they call it that. I've always just assumed it was because like a burial ground or something.
Yeah, and that would definitely make total sense for sure. Especially if there's also other paranormal stuff happening there as well. I'm not sure, but if there is, that might explain why.
There,
Um,
there's a place not too far. It's literally maybe so just on the other side of the town that I live at. And I've camped out there before, and everyone said it's like the really, really haunted places right along the river. And we've never had anything happen when I was out there. I went out there with a paranormal group and they had their little meters jumping. They were asking questions. A flashlight came on by itself, and everything then was paranormal, paranormal, paranormal. And I'm always like, well, let's not jump to conclusions that it's all paranormal. Like you got to try and rule out certain things. And but when I've camped out, I've never had any strange experiences. My buddy one night We were out there, just me and him, and creeping ourselves out. This was obviously, like I said, around high school days. And we started hearing something in the bushes, and he had a paintball gun, so we started lighting up the bushes because we thought something was creeping up on us. And all of a sudden, we start hearing "Meh, meh, meh." He apparently it was some ducks creeping
Yeah.
up on us, and he launched some paintballs towards them, and then they went off on their own way. I was like, yeah, so that was the strangest thing that ever happened to us out there. And I've camped out there like numerous times, and we never had anything strange happen.
Yeah, yeah. Then I would say that yeah, it's probably not haunted then.
Yeah,
Because like yeah, because I've if place is haunted, like that haunted, like we're talking really really haunted, then if you've been there that many times, you would have heard some sort of strange noise or some sort of weird, weird thing that you couldn't explain for sure. Just if you've been out there that many times.
yeah. So
Even if you weren't looking for something, something weird would have happened. You'd be like, what, for sure.
the
At least in
weirdest
my
things were the
experience.
people that would drive back there and see that we were back there, and they'd just turn around and stare at us for a little bit, then drive off. I was like, that's what's the creepiest thing is these people seeing us back there, and they're not just instantly leaving. They just sit there and look at us for a while. I was like, is that police? Like,
Let's hope it's police.
yeah. But a
Yeah,
couple of
because the
years ago,
alternative.
it does take a dark turn. A couple of years ago, someone actually was murdered out there.
Jeepers. Ugh.
Yeah, that was, I think like
Yeah.
5 years ago this happened. I was like, man.
Yikes.
So,
Well, you know what, like that's always like a small fear, not me getting murdered, but like because I go out exploring in the woods a lot or the swamp and like, like coming across like, the odds of coming across like a dead body or something, like it's probably very low, but you never know, man.
mhm.
Like just I was just reading on TikTok, I saw a little story from where I am. They found a dead body like at some old historical fort, like near me. And so like I've never been there, but it's definitely on my list of places to go. So
Yeah,
it's like, it's like, what are the odds that I could have been there on that day? It's like it's crazy to think about, but like you said, it's it's one of those things you hope never happens, but yeah, dude, it's weird. That would
yeah.
definitely be life-changing for sure.
So I had a friend reach out to me, one of the ones I've been out there with just recently. He figured out I was doing the podcast, and we've been talking back and forth, and he said we should talk about some of the weird things that happened out at this place. Like, I didn't have anything ever weird happen to me to talk about. Like, I was out there, nothing like strange happened, but they've had weird stuff happen to them, and I know other people have had weird stuff happen to them, but just me personally, I've never noticed it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, do you think that's just because you're a skeptic and you just or you think it's just because it just hasn't happened to you?
I've had weird things happen,
Mm-hmm.
so, but just not at this
Just
place.
not there. Yeah, yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, that's kind of like a bummer. If especially if everyone around you is like, "Oh my God, I've had this happen." And you're like, no, no, not me. I don't know what you're talking about." Like, you're like, "Am I missing something?" Like, you
I
know what I
know
mean?
me and two of my friends, we hiked through the woods for about 3 or 4 hours, and it started to get dark, and I was getting more nervous that we're going to get lost, trying to figure out because there was no trail. It was literally just we were just walking through the woods. And obviously, if you keep walking a certain direction, you're going to end up in the river, or you're going to end up at one of the roads or someone's field because it's not like a giant secluded area. We're a couple miles outside of town. But even my mom, who's lived in this area her whole life, they always heard stuff about this stuff when she was growing up. So back in the 70s and early 80s, there was always talk about crazy things going on out at this place. So that's why I even knew about it because it used to be like the whole town used to talk about, oh, this place is so creepy, it's so haunted. And again, I've never experienced anything there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, that's where you start getting into like, okay, well, what's truth, what's myth, what's really going on here? Is it really as creepy as people said, or is it just because so many people say it's creepy that when people go there, they automatically are creepy and creeped out, because it's in people's heads?
They're expecting it to happen, so they
Right,
manifest it
right,
to happen.
right, exactly. So yeah, it's like the legend gets bigger than the actual activity or the actual, the actual thing is, so that can definitely happen too,
Yeah.
for sure. Especially with every town's got something like that,
I
some
don't,
sort of like urban legend or some place that like, is
hmm.
like a scary place that, everyone talks about or whatever.
I don't know if I've mentioned this on air. I recently had an episode with someone we talked about giants. And he also done stuff on little people. And I don't remember if I told him this on air, if it was off air, but and I live in the same general areas where I grew up at. Like my parents' house is like 3 or 4 miles away. It's not that far. And when I was 8 years old, 8 or 9, now between our house, like is a ditch line, we used to call it the gully, and next door is my grandparents' house. And we used to go, me and my cousins would go down in this gully ditch area, play out in the woods. Obviously, there's one like a creek with water in it and stuff like that. Well, a couple of my older cousins were out one day with me, and we seen this little mound looking thing. It almost looked like a burrow. Like as an older person, adult now, I know what to recognize it as. And for whatever reason, they just started throwing rocks at it. Well, I didn't see it completely. I just seen something come running out of this thing, and it was maybe only like 18 inches to 24 inches, like the mound itself. Like it was right along the edge of the water. As an adult, I was like, well, it's probably like a muskrat or something. But my cousins were terrified, and they were saying it was a goblin or the one said it was a troll. Those old you remember the long-haired jewel trolls or whatever from like the early
Oh,
night.
oh my God. Yes, I do.
He said it looked like a troll. My other cousin said it looked like a goblin. We ran back to my dad, and he went out there with his 22 handgun to go take care of whatever this monster was that come out there. So it became known as the Gully Monster. And again, I only seen something run it. I didn't stick around to find out what it was. We just he took off. But again, 8-year-old kid, your imagination goes crazy. So who knows what it really was? Like I said, as an adult now, it's probably like a muskrat or some animal. We just threw it on its burrow and like come out all pissed off at us because we just smashed its house. But
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
but
Yeah,
I
it's
just
definitely
thought
interesting.
I thought it was funny that like talking about all this stuff. I was like, man, how crazy would that be if it actually was something strange? And they all said it was like a goblin or a little troll or something like that. And I was like, it's probably just a muskrat, but maybe it was. Who knows?
Yeah, right. That's super interesting. It makes you wonder. And if it was like a smaller size, then I would say it would probably less likely to be like a Pukwudgie. It would probably be like a little person or kind of like the fairy folk we were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is
From
interesting 'cause if you take into the like if you think about like how kids they say, well, people say, I don't know if this is true or not, but they say that kids can like are more susceptible to paranormal activity or can possibly see things that like adults can't and that sort of thing. You start thinking about that kind of angle with that story. Then you're like, who knows, man? Maybe you guys did see something, or maybe it was a muskrat. But it's definitely interesting for sure when you start thinking about the possibilities of like if it wasn't a muskrat, what could it have been if it was paranormal? It's possible it could have been like this little fairy type creature or something.
all I know, like there was something come out. I seen it running and I took off too.
And I do not blame you because that's what every single kid would do.
Yeah.
You're like, no, I'm out of here. You're like, I'm out. Like there's no way you're sticking around.
Yeah. I don't know what made them want to smash this den or burrow or whatever it could have been, but they want to throw big rocks at it. And next thing I know, something come running out. And I was hauling ass out of there.
Yeah, I don't know why boys do that. Like it's just something that like boys do and when they were like playing when we're little and stuff.
We
Just
got to destroy it.
yeah, like literally I watched a video before coming on here of like a couple teenage kids they had, like this huge boulder on the side of a cliff that goes into the ocean and they just like literally dislodged it and rolled it down the mountain. And that was the video. They were all like celebrating like they just won the Super Bowl. It was just boys being boys.
Yeah.
Like I don't know why we have to do that kind of stuff, but yeah, that's just like typical like kid boy behavior, like just doing stuff like that for no reason.
So my son's going to be 11 in February. So I have to keep reminding myself that the dumb things that he does and tears up, I was like, man, I used to be just as bad. I got to keep reminding myself I did the same
Yeah,
stupid stuff.
yeah, yeah. That's what they say too. I guess like when I don't have kids, but like when you have kids that like, however you were as a kid, you get it back.
Yeah.
Because they are, they are your reflection and stuff like that. So they do have some of your personality traits and stuff. And so then when you see some of the more negative ones portrayed back to you, it's got to be a weird, interesting process.
Yeah.
For
So,
sure. You're like, oh my God.
yeah. But we got 4 of them. So it's kind of goes from 12, 10, 4, and 2. So we have a,
Wow, yeah, that's all over the map.
yeah, so we're definitely running low on energy all the time just because of all the things that goes on and all the things that they do. And I wouldn't trade it though.
Oh yeah, I bet. No, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. And that's what life's about anyway, like family. You know, you only get one life to live and family's super important, so like, it's I get it. So that's awesome. That's definitely awesome, man.
Yeah. So like I said, that's kind of where I started drawing my line. And there's some stuff here we can talk about off air. Like I said, I mentioned some stuff before, but I don't like making my show about myself. So
Yeah, no, no, no worries, no worries. I always like to ask just because I like to know about, I find it interesting myself. So, but yeah, dude, yeah, such an interesting conversation, man. Like Pukwudgies are just super fascinating. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I haven't mentioned. Um, like I said, I will say this just because I haven't mentioned it yet. I have done research as far as like paranormal research, um, asking Pukwudgies specific questions about their creation, whether that's God, man, all that kind of stuff. I basically narrowed it down to like two different theories. Now I'm open to be wrong, of course, because you always have to be open to being wrong because I'm always hinging on the next piece of evidence or the next piece of evidence. You know what I mean? So
hmm
it's always ever changing. You never want to be like set in stone because I could catch something tomorrow that could change my whole idea. But I've basically narrowed it down to like two schools of thought. It's either man-made by using some sort of like witchcraft, alchemy, something like that, some sort of process where they created these type of entities, or they're created by some sort of like fallen angel or darker entity or something to that effect. And now then you start being like, well, if they created them, what's their purpose? Like I said, the Soul Stealer could be a possibility. I'm not 100% willing to say that yet. But that's kind of like where I'm at now in my research. This next year I want to try to learn as much as possible about more about Pukwudgies and these other little entities, these little people and stuff. Do some more research on the back end as far as the more book research, and then obviously in the field as well, and try to really like. I might even make like a Pukwudgie like documentary this year, possibly, depending how the research goes and if I feel like I found out more information or, it just all depends on how things go, but. That's basically where I'm at as far as like Pukwudgies. It's definitely a subject where like it's not as well like developed as like Bigfoot is, and like I feel like Bigfoot has a huge, a much bigger presence, and a lot of people have a better theory or like more theories about it and stuff. Whereas like Pukwudgies is like very small. No pun intended. But you know what I mean? Like it's not like one of the more well-known entities or cryptids or whatever you want. I don't even know what you want to classify them as even. So it's definitely it's interesting doing this whole thing and trying to like figure out that this whole Pukwudgie thing. So yeah,
when you
yeah.
were talking about your uncle's experience, it reminded me because how I find a lot of my guests is I'll either go to like a Facebook group or a Reddit group or something like that. And I'll ask if anyone wants to talk about experiences they've had or whatever. And I don't remember exactly who it was or where it was, but someone had commented their experience. And I don't read people's experiences. Like that's not what I do. I know there's podcasts out there. All they do is repeat stuff that people mail into them or they find on the internet. Here, I like to talk to the actual person. And so again, kind of paraphrasing what they'd said, but basically I don't remember if it was them or if it was their grandmother. I know they either lived with their grandmother or something like this, but they'd said that they had this little person that was always in the bathroom and it would like manifest itself in the bathroom. Like they would know because the cat would be like afraid to go in there. And one night they went in there and there's like an 18 inches tall like person by the sink and they would seen them and kind of like what you said where he got scared and disappeared. That's what this thing did. Like they turned on the light that made a shocking like eye contact with them and all of a sudden just like vanished. Like it was afraid that they'd seen it, but they'd see it every once in a while. They'd see like silhouettes or weird things going on in the bathroom, but it always seemed to be around the sink.
Yeah,
So,
that's super interesting. Now, what's weird about the cat angle is I didn't tell this part of the story just because I forgot. But when my uncle moved out of the house, they left the cat in overnight. And this is after he'd seen that Pukwudgie creature. And so when they had returned the next day, the cat's, I don't know if one of the cat's eyes or both eyes. I don't remember. But at least one of the cat's eyes was gouged out. And the cat like ran out of the house and they couldn't catch it. And they like lost the cat forever.
hmm,
So like the obviously the from what he said, the it seemed like whatever this entity was like, messed with the cat overnight or fought the cat overnight or whatever. So it's interesting that that story also has a part with the cat didn't like the other little entity or the little person or whatever. I was like, that's interesting. That's an
yeah,
interesting angle. So it's like, if yeah, so dude, that's really weird.
yeah.
That
Like
is
I said, I
really,
don't
really
know.
weird.
They didn't say it was a Pukwudgie. They just said it was like a
A little person, right?
little person looking thing.
Hmm.
And the description, they didn't say it looked like a human though. I forget how they described it, but it was I almost for some reason, and I don't know if it's because of that movie Cat's Eye, the whole Stephen King movie.
Yeah.
Uh, so maybe I'm picturing that, but for some reason I thought that's because when I was reading what they'd wrote, I was like, it almost sounds like they're telling me the plot to this Cat's Eye story. So again, when people write things, you don't know if it's true or not.
Sure, sure,
But
absolutely.
that's kind of the description they had is like a little person, but they said he was wearing like weird little clothing and stuff.
Oh, okay. So yeah, this sounds a lot like the other little entities I was talking about, like the little people.
Hmm.
Because the Native Americans also describe them because they also disappear too. They can also disappear and reappear at will. Like that's one connection between Pukwudgies and them that are similar, is they both did do that. But the little people ones, they also had this thing where they would only disappear if you stared at them. And they would like if you stared at them, they would point back at you and then they would disappear, kind of thing. And they were like little people who wore clothes and stuff and all that, and they lived deep in the woods. And it said the Native Americans said, the Wampanoags at least, they said that they died out long before the white man arrived or something like that. So that's interesting angle of that whole thing, especially like that sounds a lot more like that you're
Hmm.
describing, like a little person basically. 18 inches, like really, really, really small. And I've gotten like evidence of those kind of entities as well as Pukwudgie size entities on SLS cameras in the Hockomock Swamp. Um, which further, which is the whole reason why, to begin with, I was confused because I was expecting to just get the Pukwudgie size ones because I'm like, yeah, Pukwudgies are 2 to 4 foot tall. These are 2 to 4 foot tall. And then I started getting these other little hits that were like I said, 12, 18 inches, much, much smaller
Hmm.
hits. And so I just before I knew what they were, I was like, I'm missing something. I'm missing something. And so that's what led me to like try to figure out what they were. And that's when I discovered that I was like, oh my God, there's these like little people. This is what their names are, or like, this is what the Native Americans called them at least. So it's very interesting to get the paranormal evidence first and then be like, what the hell was that? And then try to and then look it up and then be like, oh my God, like that makes a lot more sense. You know what I mean? Like it kind of connects it all together. Um, for sure. So yeah, it's definitely been interesting, man. When you get like a hit like that on the SLS in the middle of a swamp and you see like these like one of the hits was like there was at least eight of them, eight little hits, like little bodies and stuff,
I, s-
inside
I,
of
s- I watched one of your videos recent, like it was this morning. Actually, I was watching one of your most recent ones, and it's almost like the little stick figures. You see the little dots for anyone
yes.
not
Hmm.
familiar with what you're talking about. It looks like little people, like little stick figure people movements and stuff. I, it is very creepy and interesting. Like you can see it on the screen and everything. And obviously, there's skeptics out there that claim that just picks up weird anomalous shapes or whatever. But I was like, yeah, but who knows? Like,
Yeah,
why would it just pick it up in a random spot? You know what I mean?
for sure. Especially though, I think the one you're talking about was Elkmont, and we used the SLS on the REM pod before, and nothing happened. And so then it's weird to use it again on that same REM pod. Nothing's really changed. And then to get that hit, and not only that, in that particular video, I put the leaf down and it started like dancing on top of the leaf and
Yeah.
doing like circles on the leaf, which is, crazy because it's like interacting with an object that's there, and you take the leaf away, then it's like jumping on the REM pod, trying to mess with that. And so it's like, it's definitely interesting at the very least, because, like I said, we tried it in other cabins and stuff and similar lighting and it didn't nothing popped up at all. So it's definitely interesting, especially when you couple that with like the EVPs and Spirit Box stuff and all that other stuff. It's just
Mhm.
like icing on the cake, really. But no, that was a really cool hit. But yeah, the little ones are probably just as fascinating as Pukwudgies are. Because that's like something, like I said, I just recently discovered, and it's like now it makes me wonder, like you said, are these things everywhere? Are Pukwudgies little people? Are they throughout the entire United States? You know what I mean? Are they only in certain spots? Like, and the only way to do that is to like try out and go to different places and see what I catch there. Um, but yeah, it's definitely strange for sure.
If you ever
Definitely
come to
strange.
Indiana, let me know.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. I mean, I would love to just because I've been to Indiana before. I liked it when I was there. I went to Indianapolis actually. And this is well before I started doing um like ghost stuff but I had Jimmy John's down there. It was great. So yeah, I would love to because there's a lot of cool spots in Indiana. Don't you guys? Correct me if I'm wrong, isn't there like a prison that you guys have in Indiana somewhere that like you guys can go to and do like investigations at? I might be thinking of a different state, but I thought you guys have one too.
I'm not
Could be
sure
wrong.
about a prison. I
Okay.
know, I think it's in Kentucky though. Or the, I forget what it's called. It's basically where they used to have the tuberculosis wards and everything at.
Oh, yeah, Waverly Hills,
Waverly
right?
Hills, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
that's in Kentucky though.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Okay, gotcha. But
uh,
yeah, I still want to go to Indiana anyway because I do want to go there and I want to, obviously the Pukwudgie stuff is interesting. And I would definitely like to find out if, you guys actually do have Pukwudgies
we
there and the differences and stuff.
we do have, and I only live, I used to actually work on the property. There is a state hospital for like mentally challenged people, and obviously there's other inmates out there that were deemed like unfit for prison, but they had like psychological issues. And that whole area, even when I worked out there, like there's a lot of creepy vibes of that place. But again, obviously, look what's there, like
Mm-hmm.
the energies, the type of people, and all sorts of things that have happened out there. And it's a really old place. And I didn't get to ever go down there, but supposedly there's tunnels underneath some of the buildings, and they claim the tunnels are really, really creepy.
No, I could definitely believe. I've done Penhurst in Pennsylvania. That's like very similar because they have tunnels in there and stuff like that. And yeah, those places do trap a lot of energy for sure. It just a bad thing. Even just hospitals in general. I've done a couple hospital explorers investigations, and both of the ones I did, I don't think we did one EVP session or one spirit box session or anything, and we caught like a bunch of EVPs both times. And that's just us walking, like that's just me walking around exploring. So there's definitely like residual energy in places like that, hospitals, battlefields, any sort of like trauma places for sure. It definitely seems to. Now, I don't know if it's like imprinting in the land or the place, or it's because these, people are there still. I don't know what exactly it is, but you can definitely almost feel it, when you go to some of these places for sure.
Yeah.
Um, especially if you ever been to, you might be like a couple states away, but you ever been to like Gettysburg or any of
Mhm.
those like sort of old Civil War battlefields?
No, we do have the one that I mentioned before that we called Hobbit Land as a kid.
Yep.
I think it was like the War of 1812 area or something like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that's not too far from where I live. And again, that's where a lot of my friends used to drive out that way for. whatever purposes they do as teenage kids or whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
that's where I'd always heard stuff when I was still in school. They'd call it Hobbit Land because they were out there doing whatever they were doing. And I was like, well, what were you guys doing? And you end up starting to see small little people running around out there. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so I never really took too much stock into what they were saying, but it wasn't just my friends. I ended up hearing it from a bunch of other people too. And even like people that I know from other schools, they've called it Hobbit Land too. So the whole term kind of, who knows where it originated from, but obviously someone had to have seen something to start calling it Hobbit Land.
Right, for sure. There's always got to be with any sort of myth, legend, or story like that. There's always like some kernel of truth in there somewhere.
Hmm.
It is sort of like the game of telephone, like I'm sure like we're old enough to know what that game is.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're young, you don't know what that game is, but basically the game is like there's a word or a saying and you say it to the person next to you, and then they say it to the person next to them, so on and so forth. So by the time you get like 15 people deep, it's usually completely different. Whatever the phrase was or whatever you were supposed to say is completely different than what the original message was.
Hmm.
There may be like one word that's like the same word or whatever, but the rest of it's wrong. So like it's kind of just like that when it comes to that kind of stuff. So you just never know. Like there's probably some truth in there. It's just a matter of like trying to figure out like what it is.
What bits and pieces are true?
Yeah, right, right. Exactly. Exactly. And that's like the hardest part, but that's also like the fun part. That's where like the research comes in, and then like the going out in the field and like trying to figure out that way too. It's a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I know if I come out to Indiana, you might have to consider coming out with me.
I definitely will. You let me know when you're coming, and I'll make sure to have that time available. I'm gonna tell my wife I'm going out hunting Pukwudgies. She's gonna look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Like what's a Pukwudgie? Like,
Yeah.
don't worry about
Never mind that attention to detail. That's fine. Yeah,
it.
dude. As soon as I do, because it's definitely on my list. I definitely want to get out there for sure. So, whenever that is, hopefully sooner rather than later, I will definitely let you know, man, because that'll be awesome.
Yeah. I will say if you're gonna do it in the early spring or in the fall, because once you get in the summertime, you go through those places, it is nasty.
Oh, like bugs wise?
Bug wise, snakes wise, and
Oh yeah,
sticky
right.
humidity, and
Oh
yeah,
yeah. I mean, yeah. I spent a week in God, what was it? Columbus, Ohio. So I would assume it's probably similar to that.
yeah, uh,
And that was brutal. That was like the worst experience of my life.
yeah. We get that nice, nasty summer humidity around here, so
Oh,
it's not the
brutal.
greatest.
Yeah, like that's like stuck in your AC weather
Yep.
for
So,
sure. Like that's what everyone in Columbus, Ohio were doing
yeah.
because there was no one outside. I was like, oh my God, there's no one outside. But I'm like, but then you go outside and you're like, oh my God, I know why. You shouldn't be outside.
I work outside, so I'm kind of used to it, but it
Oh
is,
yeah, oh, brutal. Well,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. You know what? It's one of those things that you're right. You're just used to it. You just body gets like used to that sort of thing. It's not a big deal for you. It's like up this way. Well, if we actually do get a winter this year, when it gets cold up here, I just get used to it. It's not a big deal. But you take somebody from Florida and put them up here, they're dying. So.
Yeah. We just had our first snow today, and it literally snowed for like 10 minutes, and then it was done. I was like, well, first
Yeah.
snow of the season.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
I do. We haven't even had snow yet, luckily. I know, which is crazy. You would think we would have snow by now, but at least where I live, I mean, in northern New England, they've had snow and stuff like that. But yeah, not much at all. Like today, it was like a tropical storm today. It was like 50 something degrees or something, 60,
That,
70-mile-an-hour winds
yeah.
and all this stuff. And I'm like, ay.
We've had the winds today. We've had just a couple days ago, it was almost 60 degrees, I think, on Friday. So
Yeah, right.
it's
It's been
crazy,
so
crazy
weird.
December weather.
For sure. It's been so weird. It's been either like nice or like 30 degrees,
We
like
had,
no in between.
yeah, we had some days that were like in the teens. So I woke up and it was really cold, and then it
Oh,
warmed.
yeah.
The other day was in the low 20s, but then it warmed up to like 55. Like, this is crazy. It's like a 30
Yeah,
degree
right,
difference.
right. And you're like, how do you dress for this? You're just like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm just gonna take this jacket off now.
Yeah. When we send the kids to school and make them wear a big jacket, they come home, they're not wearing any jackets.
Yeah. Yep, I bet. Yeah, dude. Ugh. Oh, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Phil, I think we can probably wrap this up. I'll talk to you here off air about some of the strange things that's been going on.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Thanks for having me on again, man. This has been awesome. Talking about Pukwudgies and a lot of other paranormal things. It's been a pleasure and honor. If you ever want to have me on again, I would love to come on and talk about anything. Because it was definitely a fun time hanging out and just hanging out and talking the paranormal.
Yeah, definitely have you back on here. You want to let everyone know where they can find you again?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at Exploring with Phil on all my social medias. I do weekly YouTube videos, 7 p.m. every single Thursday, a new video. Mostly Bridgewater Triangle, but I do venture out in some other areas. That's Exploring with Phil, Phil with two L's.
I'll make sure to add all that to the show notes for anyone listening so they can just scroll on down there and go right to it.
Awesome. Perfect.
Yep. Well, again, Phil, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming out and talking with me tonight. We're going to roll on out of here.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.